how well do you know yourself? When you get married, you start to learn about the person, but you also start to learn about yourself through the eyes of the other person. So it really matters who you marry. It's the same with kids. As kids are growing up, they're learning about the world, they're learning about their place in the world, but they're also learning about themselves, and they will learn about themselves through the eyes of their mum and dad. And so for mums and dads, we need to make sure that we're giving them the right message about who they are. You see, relationships are about knowing and being known, loving and being loved, seeing and being seen. And throughout church history, theologians have understood this to be true with our relationship with God as well. Augustine, Bernard, John Calvin, they all insisted that there was an unbreakable link between knowledge of God and knowledge of self. Psalm 139 verse 23, "Search me, God, and know my heart." Galatians 4:9, "Now that you know God, or rather are known by God." You see, throughout the Bible, we are to learn about God, to know Him, to explore who He is. But as image bearers of God, we are also to understand ourselves better in light of how God sees us. Knowledge of God and knowledge of self are unbreakably linked. Now, not every theologian throughout church history is entirely happy with that. For some people, all knowledge of self really just needs to be ignored. It's just a pest in the system. If we could just ignore self, we could get on with loving God and loving people. Martin Luther, A.W. Tozer, all were very strong on just ignore the self. It only gets in the way. Just focus on God and focus on others. There's a problem with that, though. And the Bible does call us to a form of self-forgetfulness, but it really matters about how we get there, because we can try and do self-forgetfulness in two very different ways. A few years ago, I renovated a house, and there was a lot of work to it. And part of the way through the renovations, I damaged my elbow. But there was so many deadlines, there was so much to do, we just said, we'll just push through and ignore it. And I would go to bed some nights and that elbow would be screaming at me. And I go through the day and you'd be trying to work with the timber and doing the block work, and you'd be popping a few painkillers just to try and get through the pain, and you would just try and ignore it. But over time, as the elbow would just keep screaming, then the shoulder started to get sore as well, because the elbow was trying to protect itself, and so it started to put strain on the shoulder, and the pain just started to spread. After a while, I decided to go to the physio, and he was amazing, and he told me how to treat it, and he did some work on the shoulder and the elbow. He gave me some exercises to do to strengthen it up, and we brought some healing to it. Now, what's amazing is that both times there was forgetfulness about the elbow. The first time I tried to just forget about the pain, and it just made it worse. And the more I tried to ignore the elbow, the more it screamed at me, and the pain spread then to other areas. But when we brought some healing to it, and some training to it, and some kindness to it, and some of those injuries were dealt with, now that I don't have a sore elbow or a sore shoulder, I'm not thinking about it. And there is a forgetfulness that comes either by trying to ignore something or by bringing healing to it. And if you try to forget something by ignoring it, it's just going to scream louder and the pain is going to spread. If you bring some healing to it, the noise begins to stop, and it's not vying for your attention all the time. As it comes to Christian theology and understanding how people work, I'm with Augustine, Bernard, and Calvin that our knowledge of God and knowledge of ourselves should be connected. That I should I should learn and explore about the majesty and wonder of who God is, but I should also understand myself better in light of how God sees me. And it is through that some healing to the soul can come, that I start to think of myself less. And sometimes when I'm talking to Christians about this, they get exhausted with themselves, where they say, listen, I am already self-obsessed. I don't want to think about myself more. What I want to say is that's trying to forget about the self by ignoring the self. And all you will do is increase the noise and increase the pain. Actually, if we're feeling self-obsessed and all we can do is think about ourselves, what the Bible calls us to, what our Christian heritage calls us to do, is to bring some healing to the self, that the noise stops, that some of those wounds scar over, and we learn to move forward. And the beautiful thing is, we start to forget. And so my plea is, as we move forward, that we combine knowledge of God and knowledge of self, that we explore who God is, but we also understand ourselves better, and we see ourselves as God sees us.